late September 2011, American drones based out of CIA facilities in Saudi Arabia crossed into Yemen and descended on a group of trucks clustered together in the desert area called the Jaf province. The group of men quickly scrambled to depart what had just become a kill zone. Amongst those men was Anwar al-Awlaki and Samir Khan, both members of the propaganda branch of Al-Qaeda in Yemen. A week later, al-Awlaki's son was targeted and killed in the desert as he searched for his father. All three of these individuals were American citizens. It hasn't been since the Civil War that the United States had carried out the deliberate killing of an American citizen as a wartime enemy and without due process. American laws governing the use of armed drone strikes are permissive to the targeting of American citizens. As such laws are conglomerated incoherently, a complete review is warranted whereby newly devised laws should be created that are acute enough to apply to the battlefield against terrorism as it exists today, not for the scenarios of the past. Based on current law, targeted killings via drone strikes of American citizens have a legal precedence. Laws should provide clear parameters by which lethal force is necessitated, and ethical transparency should prevail in the wake of armed drone strikes. In his essay on the legality of armed drone strikes against American citizens within the United States, Marshall Thompson lays out a comprehensive framework that clearly articulates that there is no legal impediment that would deter the use of drone technology on behalf of the American government to combat the growing risk of American citizens engaged in terrorist acts on the American soil. To support this claim, we'll review a few key points. Based on current law, targeted killings via drone strikes of American citizens have a legal precedence. The laws of armed conflict are born from a desire among civilized nations to prevent unnecessary suffering and destruction while not impeding the effective waging of war. A part of the public international law, the laws of armed conflict regulate the conduct of armed hostilities and are designed to protect civilians, prisoners of war, the wounded, and the sick. The laws of armed conflict apply within the boundaries of the United States, and this is supported by the historical context of the law of armed conflict. A review of the actual verbatim of the Constitution proves that armed conflict was at the forefront of debate amongst the Founding Fathers. In addition, the Bill of Rights considered the use of military force and the application of the laws of armed conflict. During the Civil War, both sides of the conflict recognized the laws of armed conflict as seen in Ex parte Milligan. Following September 11th, Congress passed the authorization for the use of military force, thus allowing the President a wide space to act against those who were responsible for the attacks. The authorization for the use of military force invokes the right to self-defense, and the UN recognized the right of self-defense immediately following the September 11th attacks. Subsequently, the laws of armed conflict applied during the War on Terror. Supportive to the argument for legal precedence, we now look to how restrictions on the use of force within the U.S. and against U.S. citizens support the targeting of American citizens. The authorization for the use of military force is an act of Congress that authorizes the President to use military force without restrictions on geography. Current legislation does not completely rule out the use of military force within the United States. Besides the argument of legal precedence, it is advisable that laws should provide clear parameters by which lethal force is necessitated. The Obama administration has escalated the drone war more than any other administration. However, it has been silent regarding the criteria for targeting U.S. citizens within the U.S. A review of Attorney General Eric Holder's address to the Northwestern University School of Law outlines the 4 elements necessary for targeting U.S. citizens in a foreign nation. These points are: the thorough and careful review process, the threat of imminent violence, capture is not feasible, and the action should be in accordance with the law of armed conflict. To support this level of transparency, the conditions of the thorough and careful review process should be provided oversight and proper disclosure without compromising the strategic advantage of American forces. This level of the process contains conflicting directives towards judiciary independent review. The authorization for the use of military force within the boundaries of congressional and presidential war powers allows for the targeting of persons without any legal requirement for judicial review. Clearly, the three branches of government were designed as counterbalances for a reason. The conditions of imminent violence appears broadly interpreted in the case with Awalaki, as he was targeted for over a year. The killing of his son a week later also seems to contradict the concept of imminent violence, as it is largely unknown if Awalaki's 16-year-old son had the capacity to commit violence against the U.S. to such calculation. In closing, American laws governing the use of armed drone strikes are permissive to the targeting of American citizens, as proven by the current established method of due process. As current laws are vague to compile a complete picture, a comprehensive review is warranted whereby newly devised laws should be created that are acute enough to apply to the battlefield against terrorism as it exists today. Based on current law, which is formulated through historical precedents, the text of the Constitution, and Supreme Court precedent, targeted killings via drone strikes of American citizens are plausible, while military force, according to the laws of armed conflict, have a legal precedence. As the current methodology of intersecting the government's interest in prosecuting the war on terror with due process, there is much room for ambiguity in the steps of establishing a careful and thorough review, establishing imminent violence, and determining if capture is feasible, and whether the situation is in accordance with the laws of armed conflict that are generally accepted by the Supreme Court. It is therefore recommended that the existing laws should provide clear parameters by which lethal force is necessitated, removing any obscurity from the process when human life is of consequence. While the process for targeting analysis for a U.S. citizen turned enemy combatant is lengthy, at the core of the process, the thorough review and imminent threat are subjective given the evolving nature of the terrorist battlefield. Americans need to decide in what capacity military force should be used on American soil and against American citizens. It is an important subject to consider given the advanced, indiscriminate, and automated nature of drone warfare.